David Harrell was a successful lawyer, known for his ability to turn around even the most complicated legal cases. He was fully dedicated to his work, living a fast-paced and intense life. Though stubborn, David had a reputation for fairness and never played dirty. One day, his firm received a case that seemed simple yet sensational. A local mosque imam was accused of inciting hatred and being involved in financing radical groups. The media quickly shaped public opinion, and the court of public judgment had already delivered its verdict long before the trial began. The case was handed to David after the previous attorney withdrew. At first, he was reluctant to take it. Too risky, he thought. But his curiosity was piqued. He decided to meet the imam in custody. When he met Imam Halim, a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed white beard and calm, steady eyes, David felt something different. There was no anger, no fear. Just deep serenity. Imam Halim greeted him with a gentle smile. "I am innocent, Mr. David," he said quietly. "And I believe that truth always finds its way." David was skeptical, of course. He was used to people hiding lies behind calm faces. But as he began to dig into the evidence, more and more inconsistencies came to light. Key evidence had been digitally manipulated. Key witnesses had ties to certain institutions with political agendas. Even the financial records, alleged to support radical groups, were nothing more than zakat transfers to orphanages abroad. The investigation pulled David deeper into the local Muslim community. He began meeting people who knew Imam Halim, a young man who had once been an addict and was now a social volunteer, a single mother who had been helped with no expectation of return, and a former convict who found new hope through the imam's guidance. David saw something he had never understood before, a community that lived simply but with love, grounded in strong moral values. Gradually, he became drawn to understand what these people truly believed. One night, after a long day in court, David sat alone in his office. He stared at a book Imam Halim had given him during their last meeting, an English translation of the Qur'an. He flipped to a random page and his eyes landed on a verse. "And do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness." The verse struck him. He realized that throughout his legal career, he had often separated justice from spiritual values. He had always viewed the law as a matter of logic and strategy, but now he saw that true justice stems from a pure heart and noble principles. The final hearing of Imam Halim's case drew national attention. In his closing argument, David gave a speech that not only defended his client but also moved many hearts. He not only proved that Imam Halim was innocent but also opened the public's eyes to how easily truth can be obscured by fear and prejudice. Imam Halim was acquitted and released. The Muslim community erupted in emotional celebration. But the bigger surprise came weeks later. David came to the mosque where Imam Halim taught. There, in front of a community that was once foreign to him, David recited the Shahida, the testimony of faith. He chose a new name, Dawood. Not out of pressure. Not out of fleeting admiration. But because his heart had found light in a place he never expected in the fight to uphold justice for a man so devoted to God, even when the world condemned him without proof. Since that day, Dawood became more than a lawyer, he became a peacemaker. He defended the rights of the oppressed, regardless of religion or skin color. But now he understood that justice was not just about winning in court, it was about defending truth with a clean heart and unwavering conviction. And in his heart, he always remembered the simple imam who once told him, "Truth doesn't need a powerful defender, only an honest heart." A few months after embracing Islam, Dawood began to feel a deep shift in how he viewed life. He was still practicing law, but his clients were no longer wealthy tycoons or ambitious politicians. He started taking on the types of cases he used to deem unprofitable: families oppressed by the system, mistreated workers, and minorities who were victims of discrimination. But the change in his heart wasn't readily accepted by those around him. Some of his former colleagues distanced themselves. Major clients terminated their contracts. Even his law firm suggested he take an indefinite leave. Still, Dawood didn't waver. He felt at peace. In his quiet moments, he often returned to the mosque, sat with Imam Halim, and learned about the meaning of patience, monotheism, and social responsibility. One day, as he swept the mosque courtyard after Maghrib prayer, a new habit he had taken on without being asked, Imam Halim approached him. "You used to stand in court for victory," the Imam said with a smile. "Now you stand for the truth." Dawood offered a small smile. "But the road to truth is lonelier, Imam." "Lonely from praise," replied Imam Halim gently, "but full of blessings." That night, Dawood returned to his now humbler apartment. In a living room furnished only with a bookshelf, a prayer rug, and a reading lamp, he opened a new case file. A young Muslim man accused of stealing corporate data used as a scapegoat simply because of his foreign-sounding name. He knew this wasn't just a legal case. It was about the constant suspicion cast on young people because of their background. He began crafting his defense, not using the cunning strategies he once excelled at, but with a foundation of justice and sincerity. As the legal process unfolded, Dawood realized something: the system was not neutral. He grew tired of the false face of justice. So he took a bold step, founding a free legal aid institute, collaborating with volunteers from all walks of life. Imam Halim became the institute's moral advisor. Though not involved directly, he was always present when guidance was needed. "Every step you take is a form of Dawah," he once told the young attorneys. And from there, Dawood's story quietly spread. Not through media coverage, but through people whose lives were beginning to change. The following year brought a heavier test. Dawood received threats. Someone broke into the office, destroyed files, and spread rumors accusing him of using the institute to promote radical ideologies. The accusations spread rapidly, and ironically, the man once seen as a champion of the legal elite was now under suspicion. Authorities launched an investigation. Journalists swarmed. Colleagues grew nervous. But Dawood didn't hire a defense lawyer. He chose to face it all openly, honestly, and with dignity. At a press conference, he said, "I didn't come to this faith to fight. I came because I saw a light I couldn't turn away from. And I chose to help those whose voices were drowned in the noise of slander." His voice trembled, but his gaze remained firm. That evening, Imam Halim visited him, as the weight of it all pressed heavily. They sat in a small garden beside the mosque. "Dawood," Imam Halim said softly, "remember the story of Prophet Yusuf. He was imprisoned not because he was guilty, but because the world feared his honesty. Will I be imprisoned too?" Dawood asked, half afraid, half ready. "If that's the path, then perhaps that's where Allah wants you to give your Dawah," the Imam replied. The investigation lasted 2 months. Throughout it, Dawood continued his work. He didn't retreat. He didn't complain. In fact, his institute grew more active. More people came to learn about the law, including non-Muslims. Eventually, the authorities declared that there was no evidence of any illegal activity. The case was closed. But Dawood knew that wasn't the real victory. The real victory came when a little boy whose mother Dawood had once defended from eviction handed him a letter. It read simply, "Uncle Dawood, I want to be a lawyer too. Not to be rich. But so honest people won't be afraid anymore." Dawood wept. Not out of sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Years passed. Imam Halim grew older. One day, he was called to return to Allah. His passing left a void in the city, a dimming of a great light. But Dawood knew the light hadn't gone out, it had simply moved into new hearts. In his will, Imam Halim left one final request. Build a law school for underprivileged children, not to create lawyers who speak well, but those who listen to their conscience. Dawood honored that wish. A few months after the passing of Imam Halim, the atmosphere in the mosque and the community was still shrouded in grief. However, in every loss, there is always a phase of healing. And in that phase, something new was born, slowly, yet strong. Dawood, who once felt alien in this new world, had now become an integral part of it. He had grown closer to the family of the late Imam Halim, especially to someone who had rarely spoken but was always present, Sinta, the only daughter of Imam Halim. Sinta was not a woman who liked to stand out. She spoke little. But behind her simple hijab and calm gaze, there was intelligence and determination, much like her father. She taught young children at the evening madrasa and coordinated women's social activities. Dawood often observed her from afar, with a respect he didn't initially understand. Their relationship never started with the words "I love you," let alone flirtation. But in many simple encounters, arranging logistics for mosque events, discussing Islamic law curriculum for the school established by Imam Halim's will, Dawood began to feel something different. He recalled Imam Halim's words. Love is not about finding someone perfect, but about finding a soul that walks in the same direction. That evening, Dawood gathered his courage. He didn't directly contact Sinta, as he had learned the proper etiquette. He went to the home of the late Imam Halim's family, met with Sinta's older brother, and expressed his intentions. I know this might be too soon after Imam Halim's passing, Dawood said calmly, but I also know, I don't want to wait for the world to approve of the feelings that have grown with deep respect. Sinta's family was surprised, but they didn't reject him. They knew Dawood. They knew of his struggles so far. And they understood that this was not just about love, but two life paths now merging in the same mission. Their wedding was held simply in the courtyard of the mosque where Imam Halim used to teach. There was no grand celebration, no crowd, only family, friends, and the children whom Sinta had taught and who Dawood had defended. In the solemn vows, Dawood's voice was firm yet trembling. He gazed at Sinta with deep respect, not just as a life partner but as the heir to the light of her father. I accept the marriage of Sinta bint Halim with a dowry of prayer tools and a promise to uphold the truth with you, until the end of my life. After the vows, an orphan child who often came to the madrasa ran up, holding Sinta's hand, and said, "Teacher, now you have a playmate, right?" Everyone laughed. But in that laughter, there was a deep emotion. Because everyone knew, their love didn't begin with a first glance, but with a long struggle, prayers that had been hidden, and the belief that Allah had brought together two souls who were equally wounded, to heal one another. A few years after their marriage, Sinta and Dawood were blessed with a son, whom they named Halim Dawood, combining the name of the grandfather and the father. The child grew up surrounded by love, knowledge, and example. By the age of 5, he had memorized Surah al-Balad, which Dawood always recited before going to work. At 7, he started accompanying his father to court, sitting quietly in the back while holding a sketchbook. Sinta raised their child with gentleness and firmness. Dawood instilled values of courage and honesty. The law school they founded became a center for learning integrity and social justice, producing young lawyers who were not only intelligent but also of good character. Every night, Dawood would read books to little Halim. And on the wall of the child's room, there hung an old photo of Imam Halim, smiling wisely, with eyes that always seemed to say, "Truth does not die as long as there are hearts that protect it." A few years after their marriage, Dawood and Sinta's life unfolded with a beautiful simplicity. They lived in a small house not far from the mosque where Imam Halim used to teach, and also near the legal aid office Dawood had founded. Every morning, Dawood would wake up before dawn, prepare the water for ablution, and gently wake Sinta. They would pray together, then have breakfast with their son, Halim Dawood, before starting their respective days. Dawood's life as a lawyer was not like most others. He rarely appeared on television and did not handle big, sensational cases. He chose to walk through narrow alleys, enter small houses, and listen to stories from those who were never given space in courtrooms. Sometimes, he defended workers paid below the minimum wage. Sometimes, he defended a poor father falsely accused of theft. There were times when he became the legal companion of an elderly woman who was about to be evicted without compensation. But one thing he always did, he never asked for payment. "I am paid with prayers," he would say when a client was unsure of what to offer him. Dawood knew he couldn't solve all the injustices in the world, but he also knew that one small justice upheld could create a great wave in people's hearts. One day, a young woman came to his office, crying because she had been fired from her job simply for wearing a hijab. Dawood took the file, looked into her eyes, and said, "I won't just defend you in court. I will defend your rights as a human being." He won the case in court. But more than that, he won the hearts of the people who began to realize that justice is not an exclusive right, it's a right for every soul. While Dawood was busy with the world of law, Sinta chose a quieter yet profound path. Every afternoon, children from various corners of the neighborhood came to the mosque. They ran with innocent laughter, carrying Iqra books, some with ice cream stains on their mouths, while others brought their younger siblings who couldn't walk yet. In a small room beside the mosque, Sinta sat cross-legged with patience. She taught one by one how to read the Qur'an, daily prayers, and most importantly, good character. Learning is not just about reading correctly, but having a correct heart, she would say to the children. When you leave here, don't just take your memorization. Take with you a smile, politeness, and honesty. Some of the children came from broken families, some had lost their parents, and others were accustomed to violence. But in that small gathering, they felt loved. Sinta would gently rub their heads, listen to their worries, and pray for each one of them before they went home. Sinta never posted about her activities. But one day, Dawood found a folded paper from little Halim's bag. His handwriting was still untidy, but the message was clear. My mother isn't a famous person on TV. But she taught me to know Allah, so I know who to listen to when the world is noisy. Dawood and Sinta's home became a place of refuge for many. Sometimes mothers came asking for advice, sometimes young people came seeking guidance about the future, and sometimes teachers came to discuss their students. They didn't have much, but what they had they shared. Warm food, sincere advice, and tranquility. Many said their home was like a calm well in the middle of a desert. Sinta continued to be a Quran teacher, even while pregnant with their second child. Dawood continued to be a defender of the people, even when his health started to decline. They knew that life wasn't about luxury, but about making a difference. And they learned that true love wasn't about sharing wealth, but about sharing a common goal. After years of helping the community through legal aid organizations and living a simple life with Sinta, Dawood felt that something was missing. A message from Imam Halim, which often echoed in his mind especially during the nights when he was reflecting at his desk, began to urge him to take further action. Build a law school for children who cannot afford it. Not to produce lawyers who are good at speaking, but those who are good at listening to their conscience. Dawood realized that the time had come to fulfill this trust. The school would not only teach legal theory or worldly knowledge. It had to become a place where the younger generation would be taught true justice, about recognizing Allah, and how to treat others with kindness. An education that was not only about earning a degree but also about forming a strong character. Dawood and Sinta began searching for a location. They visited many villages and outskirts, trying to understand the needs of communities that were not easily accessible to formal education. After some time, they decided to establish the school in an area full of poor families and children who could not access proper education. The school would charge no fees. Its students would be taught not only knowledge and skills but also values of honesty, social responsibility, and a sense of duty toward the community. Building the school was not easy. Dawood faced many obstacles, from funding issues to challenges from those who felt threatened by the vision of education that would be taught there. Some even tried to sabotage his efforts by spreading rumors that the school was a place to influence children with a certain ideology. However, Dawood remained firm. He knew this was the right path. Together with Sinta, they gathered support from friends, philanthropists, and community organizations with similar visions. After much struggle, the school was finally established. Imam Halim School, as they named it. A tribute to the person who had opened Dawood's eyes to the meaning of life, and as a symbol of Dawood's loyalty to the late Imam's message. On the first day the school opened, Dawood stood in front of the students, most of whom appeared confused, while others already seemed enthusiastic. They were children from marginalized families, children who might never have imagined they could receive such a high level of education. Sinta, despite being busy with her duties as a Quran teacher at the mosque, took the time to come and motivate the students. This school is not just a place to chase grades. It is a place to seek your rights, to learn what truth is, and how to keep your heart straight, Dawood said with enthusiasm, reminding them of the responsibility they carried. Imam Halim School was not an ordinary school. There, each student received personal attention. They were not only learning math, history, or languages. They were also taught how to be virtuous, how to defend the weak, and how to fight for justice. The school became a real example that education is not just about producing academically skilled graduates but also plays a role in shaping the morals and character of children who would later become leaders. Imam Halim School grew rapidly. The students who graduated from there not only held academic degrees, but they also carried the noble values taught there. Many of them returned to their communities to help, teach, and become defenders of the rights of the underprivileged. Some even continued their studies at prominent universities with a new spirit, a spirit to become lawyers, teachers, and leaders with integrity. Sinta also continued to play a major role in religious education at the mosque. Every day, after school, she returned to the mosque to teach children who came to learn the Quran. She felt that by educating the younger generation, she was planting seeds of goodness that would grow into large trees, providing benefits for many people. Dawood and Sinta often talked about how they could keep moving forward. They felt that, despite the challenges in their lives, they had found peace in every small step they took to make the world a little better. One evening, Dawood sat with Sinta in the yard of their home, watching the sun set in the western horizon. He felt that his life was now full of meaning. Imam Halim was right, said Dawood, blessings come not because we collect wealth, but because we share knowledge and uphold the truth. Sinta smiled and held her husband's hand. And those blessings come from Allah. We are just trying to walk His path. That night, in their home full of prayer and knowledge, they knew that every step they took, every action they made, was part of a long journey to spread a light that would never fade. The lives of Dawood and Sinta have not always been smooth. Although they had established a school that taught truth and justice, and lived a simple life full of love, many challenges came to test their resolve. Just like stones that are polished into gems, they had to endure heavy trials in order to stay on the path they had chosen. The rapidly growing Imam Halim School, which had become a beacon of hope for many, began to attract the attention of those who felt threatened by its existence. There were people who disagreed with the educational approach taught by Dawood, which emphasized moral values, truth, and justice, not just academic knowledge. They considered the school to be teaching something dangerous, especially since many of its graduates began to speak out about human rights, social justice, and advocating for the oppressed. One morning, Dawood received a letter from a group of large businessmen threatening to revoke the school's operational license unless they changed the curriculum. They accused the school of teaching an ideology that conflicted with their economic interests. Dawood and Sinta felt betrayed. However, they both knew they could not back down. This is the path we have chosen to uphold the truth, Dawood said to Sinta firmly. We must stand tall. In the following months, they worked hard to face this pressure. Dawood consulted with a lawyer and tried to gather support from the community and non-governmental organizations that also believed in education based on morals and integrity. Sinta, who often spent her time teaching at the mosque, also became passionately involved in defending the school. Together with the teachers and parents, they held various meetings to raise awareness about the importance of fair and honest education. Eventually, through their tireless struggle, they managed to keep the school open. Support from the wider community and key figures who backed their vision paid off. Imam Halim School continued to operate and became even more widely known as an educational center that not only produced graduates with high knowledge but also with noble character. Although Imam Halim School had won the battle against the groups trying to shut it down, another challenge soon arose. An economic crisis hit their region. Many people lost their jobs, and the donors who had previously supported the school began to reduce their contributions. Resources to run the school became increasingly limited. Sometimes, even electricity and water were cut off due to unpaid bills. Dawood and Sinta felt cornered, but they never gave up. They sold some of their valuable possessions to pay for the school's needs. Dawood even started taking on extra work as a lawyer outside of office hours to raise funds. Sinta, who had previously only taught at the mosque, now took on more teaching hours, even teaching religious studies to housewives who wanted to deepen their understanding of religion. They also sought creative solutions to solve the school's financial problems. Sinta began organizing charity bazaars at the mosque, selling food and goods made by the mothers in the surrounding community. They also started offering skills training programs, such as sewing and cooking courses, to help the community earn extra income while also funding the school. The first customers of the skills training program were the mothers who had studied at the mosque and become part of a larger community. They helped in their own ways, contributing money, goods, or even time and effort to support the school's sustainability. Although there were many long nights filled with anxiety, Dawood and Sinta eventually managed to get through this tough period. The community became more solid and committed to helping. The school remained standing, and this further strengthened their belief that they were on the right path. As a busy couple, Dawood and Sinta began to find it difficult to balance their heavy work commitments with their family life. Halim Dawood, their son, was approaching his teenage years, and they felt that he needed more attention. Although young Halim had always been raised with values of goodness, there were times when Dawood and Sinta worried that their son might feel a lack of affection due to their busy schedules. Sinta sometimes felt anxious because many nights she had to go teach while Dawood came home late from legal matters. They both committed to spending more time with Halim, despite their hectic schedules. "We must be an example for Halim, not just in words but in actions," Sinta said one night when they discussed their family challenges. With that, they started planning more time together. They often took simple trips to places not too far away, so Halim could feel that his parents were present for him, despite their busyness. They also established a household policy to focus more on family time. Even though it was short, that time became valuable, filled with prayers, discussions, and love. Amidst all the external challenges, there were also tests that came from within themselves. At times, fatigue and despair arrived unexpectedly. Dawood, who had always been the pillar for others, sometimes felt overwhelmed by the heavy burden. Similarly, Sinta, though always calm, began to experience inner unease about whether what they were doing was enough for the world. Both of them felt anxious, but they also knew that Allah had always given them the strength to face these trials. This is a long journey, and we will never know the final outcome. But we know that as long as we walk with good intentions, Allah will always provide a way, Dawood said one night while talking with Sinta. With unwavering determination and each other's support, they managed to get through all these trials. Every time a challenge arose, they always returned to the message from Imam Halim that never ceased to echo in their minds. Never stop seeking the truth, and never give up on making this world a better place. Halim Dawood, the first child of Dawood and Sinta, grew up in an atmosphere filled with love, knowledge, and goodness. From a young age, he was accustomed to seeing his parents fight for justice, stand firm for truth, and always give their best for the community. However, despite being raised in such an inspiring environment, Halim had his own journey, one that would test whether he could continue his parents' struggle. Halim not only saw his parents as his father and mother but also as tireless heroes who dedicated themselves to benefiting others. However, Halim often felt a great deal of pressure on his shoulders, the pressure to live up to the high hopes his parents had for him. He knew that the school his parents had founded was a significant dream, and he felt responsible for keeping it strong. Yet, despite feeling proud of their struggle, he began to feel his own confusion about what he wanted in life. In his teenage years, Halim began questioning his life's purpose. He loved knowledge and wanted to pursue higher education, but sometimes he felt that the path ahead had already been determined by his parents, becoming like his father, who fought as a lawyer, or like his mother, who dedicated herself to education and religion. "I don't know if I can be like you," Halim said one night to Dawood and Sinta while sitting together at their simple dining table. Dawood, who often tried to offer the best advice to his son, smiled and gently stroked Halim's hair. "My son, you don't have to be like us. Being yourself is what's most important. You'll find your own path. What matters is that whatever you choose, do it with your whole heart." Sinta, who was usually calmer, softly added, "Don't be afraid to find your true self, Halim. Don't get trapped in the shadow of who your parents are. Allah has already determined your path in life, and all we want is for you to live with goodness and be a person who brings benefit to others." Halim decided to continue his education at university, but he chose a field different from both of his parents. Instead of law or religious education, Halim chose to study engineering. Although this decision initially surprised Dawood and Sinta, they never hindered his choice. They believed that as long as Halim chose a path that made him happy and would be beneficial, it was the right decision. However, even though he chose a different field, Halim remained inspired by the values his parents instilled in him. He chose an engineering discipline that not only taught theory but also focused on how to build something useful for society. He became interested in renewable energy and how technology could be used to help poor and marginalized communities. Halim also continued to be involved in social activities, helping at Imam Halim School, and dedicating time to teach children around their neighborhood. While he didn't follow his father's path to become a lawyer or his mother's to become a religious teacher, he felt that helping others was his life's calling, albeit in a different way. After several years of education, Halim returned home to his parents. Now, he was not just a young man who had completed his higher education, but also someone who brought new ideas about how Imam Halim School could evolve further. Halim had a dream of integrating technology into education. He saw that the education his parents provided was deeply focused on moral development and noble values, but he also believed that in order to face the challenges of the times, this education needed to introduce technology to children in villages and poor communities. He envisioned a school that not only taught justice and truth but also provided practical skills for navigating the modern world, including digital skills, technology, and innovation. After long discussions with Dawood and Sinta, Halim decided to contribute more significantly to the school his parents had founded. He began designing programs that combined moral education with practical skills. He initiated computer and robotics classes for children, ensuring that they not only learned to be good people but also to be prepared to face the challenges of an increasingly complex world. Halim also proposed that Imam Halim School start offering scholarships to outstanding children from underprivileged families, so they could continue their education at a higher level without being hindered by financial constraints. "This is not just about teaching knowledge," Halim told the teachers at the school. "It's about preparing our children to become leaders in the future, leaders who are not only smart but also civilized and virtuous." With his determination and new spirit, Halim became a young leader at Imam Halim School. He worked with teachers and staff to implement innovative programs that combined moral education with modern skills. The students learned not only about truth and justice but also about technology they could use to make a big change in the world. Imam Halim School became known not only for its excellent religious education but also for its innovative approach to teaching children about the digital world. Halim, at just 26 years old, showed that he could further develop the school and create a new generation ready to face the future's challenges with courage, knowledge, and strong faith. Dawood and Sinta, who saw their son evolve into a brave and visionary leader, felt proud and grateful. They knew that, although their paths were different, they had successfully instilled the right values in Halim, values that would continue to live and grow within him, and within the generations they educated. "We've always believed in you, Halim," Dawood said one night after dinner with the family. "We don't need to worry, because you will carry this light even further." Sinta nodded gently, smiling. "You are the light we hope for the world, Halim." And there, in the home filled with prayers and hope, Halim knew that the journey was still long. But he felt certain that he was on the right path, a path that began with his parents' struggle, and now continued with his determination and spirit to bring real change to the world.